Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for your interest in our Hantel Tech Webinar Series. We're really excited to be able to have Blasius, who's from Foster Corporation, to share about custom compounding for healthcare. And he'll have also he's an R&D manager with Foster Corporation, and he's broadcasting in from back east. And he had, for a preview, he had some really interesting topics, like also some new materials that might not be aware of, and just other aspects. But without much further ado, I'm going to let him take it away. And also, we're going to probably focus on saving our questions for the last 10 to 15 minutes. So just jot your notes down, and we'll take it from there. All right, so go ahead and take it away, Bel.
Thank you, Delia. I'd like to talk about the role that a custom compounder can play in creating novel, effective, and safe medical devices. Today's agenda includes an introduction to Foster Corporation's business units, a primer on Arkema's Pebax Elastomers, a review of radiopaque materials commonly used in catheters, a summary of medical nanocomposite processes and properties, and finally, a formulator's perspective on medical device component design possibilities and considerations. Foster Corporation was founded 23 years ago to fill a gap as some of the larger compounders abandoned the medical device market because of the perception of carrying too much risk for the potential volumes and returns. A distribution business was started to complement the compounding business. This allows small volume converters to purchase both custom and natural resins from a single source. The business was extended to include CGMP level procedures to compound active pharmaceutical ingredients into mutually soluble polymers. Implants and bioresorbables are also part of this enhancement. Foster currently operates 2 production facilities, one in Connecticut and one in Nevada. The business is divided up into 3 specialized units. Foster Compounding handles Class 1 and 2 medical devices and is the premier supplier of CPU and polyamide radiopaque compounds for catheters. Foster Delivery Science creates polymeric compounds for medical implants and drug delivery. Polymer Distribution represents Arkema's medical-grade Rilsan polyamides and Pebax ether-amide copolymer elastomers. There is little overlap between the business units. Each was set up to serve a specific unmet need in the healthcare industry, and each has its own unique set of clients. The custom compounding business is core to Foster and is its main volume interface with the healthcare industry. Radio opacity allows surgeons and technicians to follow catheters and catheter-delivered accessories as they are snaked through the body to the exact spot where they need to be deployed for maximum therapeutic benefit. There are 5 primary inorganic materials that are used to develop radio opacity. They are barium sulfate, bismuth subcarbonate, bismuth trioxide, bismuth oxychloride, and tungsten. Their one common trait is their extremely high density. They vary in efficiency, cost, thermal stability, and interactions with medical-grade polymers. All these materials have been tested and approved for biocompatibility. They all have a long history of use in medical devices. In addition to radiopaque fillers, Many applications could require the incorporation of nanoparticles for enhanced rigidity and torsional modulus, lubricant to compensate for the natural grippiness of most elastomers, heat stabilizers to help reduce degradation through compounding and part conversion, UV stabilizers to minimize metal catalyzed reactions between light and polymers, processing aids to maximize surface smoothness of extruded articles, antimicrobial to lessen the chances for hospital-acquired infections. Other material customizations include incorporating a reactive coagent to promote cross-linking during E-beam or gamma sterilization. Electrically conductive elements can also be built into a compound. As a general guide, this chart shows the range of polymers typically compounded by Foster. It encompasses everything from commodity olefins to high-temperature ketones and difficult-to-handle fluoropolymers. There are few applications and medical procedures that custom compounded polymers aren't required for. Foster's compounds are routinely used in all the areas shown. Foster is dedicated to providing a full range of polymer services to medical device manufacturers. On the front end of development, formulation and process feasibility can be checked in as few as 50 grams in a mixing bowl coupled to a fully instrumented torqueometer. This maximizes the efficient utilization of scarce or expensive ingredients. Appropriately sized compounding equipment produces scale-up quantities of custom compounds for testing and extensive evaluation. The production facilities were designed to allow for the flexibility to use the optimum process flow for a compound rather than forcing a compound to fit a process. An innovation center has been operating in the Connecticut headquarters to aid in compound development, prototyping, and physical property testing. By combining those services in one location, outsourcing to multiple vendors can be avoided. As you can see, a broad range of rheological, thermal, physical, and chemical testing is available in-house. The delivery science business operates in a niche that is very different than is typical for the industrial plastics compounding industry. Delivery science creates custom polymeric compounds in a Class 7 clean room and works at pharmaceutical cGMP standards. The facility is ISO 13485 and 9001 certified. It's FDA registered and is approved to handle Schedule 2 through 5 active ingredients by the Drug Enforcement Agency. The Delivery Science Group has experience compounding polyethylene, polyurethanes, and PEEK for long-term implantation. Resorbable polyesters are used for diverse applications such as controlled release drug delivery and bone screws. Delivery Science has been collaborating with major pharma companies to create hot melt compounds that enhance the solubility and therefore efficacy of active pharmaceutical ingredients. Alkali-soluble polymers can protect drugs from the acidic environment of the stomach and allow dissolution in the higher pH small intestine. As with the core business, delivery science services cover the front end of development through to full-scale production under cGMP conditions and standards. Combination products can incorporate drugs, radiopaque fillers, and bone growth encouraging minerals such as tricalcium phosphate and hydroxyapatite. Delivery science can provide compounds as a standard pellet or can fabricate semi-finished articles in the form of powders and pressed tablets, monofilaments, film, and tubes. Polymer distribution is the third business unit. Polymer distribution helps small volume medical converters obtain material without the worries of unacceptably high minimum purchases. Currently, Foster distributes Arkema's medical-grade real sand polyamide 11 and 12 and Pebax polyether block amide copolymer elastomers. The block copolymers have been tested for USP Class 6 biocompatibility. They achieve their flexibility without the need for potentially extractable plasticizers. Pebax can be sterilized by ethylene oxide, steam, and gamma irradiation methods. A range of hardnesses from 25 short D, 75 short A, to 72 short D are commercially available. Pebax can also be easily alloyed with nylon 12, thermoplastic polyurethanes, and polystyrene acrylonitrile copolymers. With the right compatibilization techniques, a very broad range of blends is possible. Foster has 8 grades of medical-grade Pebax copolymers available. To complement the elastomeric Pebax grades, real sand polyamide 11 and 12 are also available. Polyamide 12 is the next step up from the hardest Pebax grade and begins to transition into the lower number polyamides, which is nylon 6 and 6,6 and 4,6. Like Pebax, real sand is easy to process and can be used in a broad range of environments. The 6 grades of real sand A, polyamide 12, and B, polyamide 11 grades are available through distribution for medical applications. And they're shown here. The next few slides will be a quick primer on Pebax elastomers. Like other block copolymers, such as thermoplastic urethanes and styrene butadiene copolymers, Pebax polymers rely on a scheme of utilizing a rigid, hard block for strength and heat resistance, and a soft block for elasticity and low temperature resistance. In the case of Pebax, the hard block is a strongly hydrogen bonding polyamide, and the soft block is a hydrolysis-resistant polyether. There are 2 main families of Pebax. the standard hydrophobic grades have great mechanical properties and dimensional stability. The hydrophilic grades find utility in applications where high moisture vapor transmission rates or anti-static properties are needed. Pebax follows a standard naming convention based on physical properties, stabilizer, and target market. The most important thing to remember is that the first two numbers represent the Shore-D hardness. When ultimate tensile strength versus grade is plotted, one can see how break strength increases with increasing hard block to soft block ratios. This is directly related to hardness. The harder the polymer, the higher the tensile strength. Graphing elongation of break versus grade shows that decreasing the hard block to soft block ratio leads to greater elongation and therefore flexibility. Flexural Modulus is very reflective of hard and soft block ratios. The hardest grades would be best for transferring torque, while the soft grades are appropriate for catheter tips, where it needs to softly sneak around corners without causing tissue damage. The key to a good block copolymer is having two components that are compatible, but that phase separate to build a self-reinforcing morphology. In this way, the best of the hard and soft blocks can be taken advantage of. Pebax maintains its low temperature flexibility better than competitive materials, as shown in this graph. TPU and polyester elastomers become significantly harder as the temperature drops below 0 C. Pebax comes in sealed bags. If there has been an incursion, the material will need to be thoroughly dried prior to melting. It can be processed by all the standard thermoplastic processing methods. All grades of Pebax can be injection molded. This chart shows the suggested temperature ranges for molding Pebax. There is a direct relationship between hardness and injection molding temperatures. The harder, more crystalline grades require more heat to achieve the desired melt viscosity. This chart shows the melt temperatures recommended for extrusion. As with injection molding, there is a direct relationship between hardness and required extrusion temperatures. When compared to other thermoplastic elastomers, polyether amides have better resilience, processability, availability, and thermal resistance. They can also be sterilized by the broadest range of methods. In summary, Pebax has a combination of properties that has made it the primary base material for invasive medical devices. The next slides are an introduction to radiopaque compounds. As mentioned before, radiopaque compounds are used in applications where a medical professional needs to track a device in the body. Most polymers have the same X-ray attenuation as skeletal muscle and would appear transparent. The addition of metallic fillers makes the device shine brightly when X-rayed. X-ray opaque compounds find utility in most catheters and are critical in minimally invasive procedures. The key fillers are barium, bismuth, and tungsten-based. This X-ray shows the effect of loading on the different types of radiopaque fillers. Starting from the top, you can see 20 and 40% barium sulfate and 20 and 40% bismuth subcarbonate. The middle tube that you can barely see is the unmodified neat resin. Continuing with 20 and 40% bismuth oxychloride and 50 and 80% tungsten. The corner blocks are aluminum and acrylic step blocks to help gauge the effectiveness of the fillers. In this case, 20% barium sulfate is equivalent to 1 millimeter of aluminum, and 80% tungsten is more effective than 9 millimeters of aluminum. The fillers come in several morphologies. Most are small, irregular particles made by milling larger particles, and that would be representative of the barium sulfate. Bismuth oxychloride is unique with its plate-like structure, which gives rise to a level of pearlescent effect in the final part. Filler selection depends on a series of considerations. As tubing wall thickness decreases, a filler with higher attenuation or higher density is required to see the device. All fillers have different physical shapes. A smooth, platy particle can yield a smoother extrudate than a rough, irregular one. Some fillers, such as tungsten, are very gray and don't lend themselves to coloring. When maximum physical properties are needed, minimum filler loadings are necessary. That requires the highest elemental density. There are also some physical chemical effects. Platy particles will increase flexural modulus, as will the interaction of tungsten with amide hard blocks. The deeper a catheter will use in the body, the densest fillers perform best and show the most contrast. Performance comes at a cost. The densest materials are also some of the most expensive. Some of the key physical properties for the 5 most common radiopaque fillers are summarized in this chart. The most striking difference is an increase in density when moving from barium sulfate with a specific gravity of 4.4 up to tungsten with a specific gravity over 19. The energy required to unbind a K-shell electron is shown in this table. The K edge values are for the metal component of the compound. Bismuth trioxide has the potential to be the best all-around radiopaque filler, but it trades radioopacity with processing, color, and stability issues. Bismuth subcarbonate has good radioopacity, color, and thermal stability, but suffered from agglomeration issues. To improve dispersibility, Foster worked with a partner to create a new morphology which has been shown to disperse consistently better than the old standard grades. This new material is being used in an ever-increasing number of new catheters. The perfect white, thermally stable, and chemically inert filler has yet to be invented. Until then, we can use properties like K-edge to lead us to the best compromise. Foster holds patents for nanoclay reinforced polyamides and their use in medical devices. The following slides will explain the technology and show some of the benefits. Nanoclays have received significant academic and commercial interest over the last 20 years. Because of their small size and unique architecture, a variety of positive attributes are expected with the development of a nanoclay polymer composite. Nanoclay increases various physical properties as shown in this slide. Using nanoclay in compounding has a wide range of benefits over raw resin or a fiberglass-filled compound. The basic process to take raw clay and turn it into something useful is outlined here. The application critical step is the final surface treatment. This modification allows the clay to swell and separate into its primary particles. The treatment also enhances wet out and adhesion by the host polymer. It is difficult to quantify the aspect ratio of a plate-like particle. The convention with nanoclays is to ratio the length or width to the thickness. With nanoclays, the thickness is on the order of 1 nanometer, and the width or length is around 300 to 1,000 nanometers, or close to 1 micron. After surface treatment, the particles will be mixed with the polymer under some level of heat and shear. The particles will swell, and the polymer chains will start to move into the gaps. With exfoliation, dispersion down to the primary particle is accomplished. There are 2 production routes to make a nanocomposite. In the first, untreated clay is added to a reactor, and the clay is exfoliated as the polymerization runs. With the extrusion compounding route, the treated clay is exposed to heat and shear in order to advance exfoliation. The compounding route has significant advantages in formulation flexibility. Nanoclay may be compounded with any combination of resins, fillers, and additives. These photomicrographs show the fine dispersion of nanoclay that can be achieved in a composite. The difference in properties between the reactor and compounding routes was characterized by specific gravity, tensile strength, flexural modulus, notched izod pendulum impact, and heat distortion temperature testing. The changes in properties by creating a nanocomposite by the two standard methods are summarized here. The reactor method has a slight advantage over compounding in total property improvement, but still cannot compete with compounding in terms of resin types and formulation flexibility. One of Foster's discoveries was that nanoclay in polyamide elastomers maintains or surpasses the ductility of the base resin. This was very surprising given the reputation of polyolefin nanocomposites. With many polypropylene homopolymer nanocomposites, ductility drops faster than the other properties increase. This leads to Band-Aid formulations that never achieve the originally desired result. This was not the case with elastomeric polyamides. Increasing amounts of nanoclay leads to increases in flexural modulus. Notably, 8% nanoclay approaches the flexural modulus of a fiberglass composite. Because of its size and brittleness, fiberglass is not necessarily an attractive reinforcement for small bore tubing, while nanoclay makes sense for such applications. Flexural modulus is a good proxy for the ability of a catheter to be torqued and to have that torque efficiently transferred down the length of the catheter. Fiberglass is still an excellent choice for reinforcing injection molded structural parts, such as instrument housings. This illustrates how platelets can affect the physical property mix. The flat, square morphology of the nanoclay appears to most readily enhance flexural modulus and izod impact strength. Without a significant aspect ratio and isotropy, the platelets are not as efficient in modifying tensile strength. A fibrous nano reinforcement, such as halloysite or palygorskite, with an easily identified length to diameter aspect ratio, would be expected to have more of a positive effect on tensile strength. In this final section, we would like to discuss design considerations and possibilities and the formulation techniques that will enable the execution of cutting-edge designs. It is almost redundant to say that melt viscosity drives processing. The success of a custom compound depends on maintaining a melt viscosity over a series of production runs. That melt viscosity also needs to be the right one to match the required pressure drops in the process. In order to maintain a stable melt viscosity, antioxidant and thermal stabilizers should be added at the compounding step to make up for those that will be lost with each additional thermal history. Injection molding through a hot runner system can be especially brutal on a resin stabilizer system. To get the right viscosity, some polymers, such as polypropylene, are cracked or sheared at high temperatures in the presence of a free radical source. Linear materials, such as polyesters, can have their melt viscosity and melt strength enhanced by reacting them with a chain extender. When designing a medical device that will be bonded together, the method of joining needs to be understood by the compounder. Something that seems inconsequential, such as color, can have an unexpected effect on RF welding. For example, organic red dye or pigment will have a very different response to radio frequency than a metallic, inorganic red pigment. The wrong dispersion aids can impact thermal and ultrasonic welding by leaving a waxy residue on the surface. Laser welding can be enhanced with additives and pigments which absorb and concentrate the laser's light energy into heat. Overmolding can be simplified if the base cover system is designed to work together. Additives can go into each resin to create a molecular hook and loop interface. Sterilization is something that can have unintended consequences on a resin if not properly compensated for. Nanoclays can enhance the heat distortion temperature of crystalline resins that will be steam sterilized. Crystalline amorphous polymer blends can have improved chemical resistance when exposed to ethylene oxide as over straight crystalline or straight amorphous resins. High energy methods are especially tough on polymers, and a little antioxidant can mean the difference between failure and success. Primary and secondary antioxidants can help reduce degradation in polymers prone to fission, such as polypropylene, and minimize embrittlement in cross-linking polymers, such as high-density polyethylene. Printing can be achieved by a few different methods. Inkjet inks can wet out better with some surface active agents built into the base resin. Laser marking almost universally needs to be color controlled and have some laser activated additives compounded in. Cross-linking can be encouraged by adding in a co-agent that will co-cross-link with the base resin during electron beam processing of a part. This will allow the part to behave as if it were formed from a thermoset resin while keeping the fabrication flexibility of a thermoplastic. Each year, more resin and additive suppliers issue medical application policies that make it more difficult to use the optimum polymer or additive combination. The policies range from requiring prior approval to forbidding usage in any body contact application. There are more ISO 10993 tested resins, additives, and color combinations available than ever before. This is an effective insurance policy against cytotoxicity failures during submission testing. Because invasive medical devices use so little material, volume minimums are often difficult to meet. The medical device industry needs to value each resin, colorant, and additive supplier who will participate in this heavily regulated and litigious market. There may be a time when they become so scarce that the sustainability of the device industry will be in doubt. No one wants to be that customer who pushed a major supplier into withdrawing. Cutting-edge imaging can utilize different contrasting and mapping methods. Light can be managed with pigmentation and unique inorganic complexes. Electrical, ultrasonic, and physical properties can all be modified through alloying, additives, and structuring to create unique, differentiated medical devices. And that is all part of the role of a custom compounder. For more information, please feel free to contact your local salesperson, or you can contact me with design, development, and polymer questions. We have an excellent team that has been assembled to help you through the process of choosing the right base resin and additives to make your device exactly what you hope it can be. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you.
If you have any questions, be happy to try to answer them.
All right, first a round of applause for that really thorough. We can start with questions whenever.
Yeah, hi, this is Dave. I got a question regarding your how you characterize your medical, food grade, and standard grades. First one is, what is the chemical structure difference of those different grades? And number two, what are the property changes that we see moving from one grade to the other?
Well, really the big difference between standard FDA and medical grades is formulation stability and raw material stability. For industrial grades, the raw materials going into the product can change based on who has the lowest price. For FDA grades, that's regulated to a different level, and all the raw ingredients, while they may change, have to be made to FDA standards and meet those standards for extractability at the final product. And for medical, the raw materials are just controlled. No changes are allowed. So from that point of view, there's a lot more pressure on maintaining consistency of supply. So in terms of differences in physical properties, there really isn't. It's more about maintaining that consistency of formulation and not allowing changes.
Questions in the room. And I'm not sure if you can see, if there's anybody online that might have, you can chat. And for the people, if they are logged in online, I think there's a chat box. Okay, well, we don't see questions in that area, but yeah, for people logged in online. So if there's any other questions, I actually had another question. I really like the way you're introducing, where you were talking about when you use colorants and how they could affect the RF welding, could you also see, for instance, when you'd have to be aware of, say, it could change the properties like the Flexural Modulus that you talked about when you had the nanocomposites and how that, I guess, are there any combinations, or really you've mainly seen that difference with when you had welding or RF welding, bonding issues?
Yeah. In terms of properties, colorants have a little less effect, mostly because they're used at such low levels. So 1% would be a lot of colorant. More typical would be 1/3%. So you might expect maybe a 10% drop in properties when you go from natural resin to a colored resin. And that will go across the board from elongation at break to tensile strength. Flexural modulus probably won't change much at all.
Okay.
As opposed to with the radiopaque fillers where they're being used between 20 and 80%, where they really have a chance to become a major reinforcing factor. And radio frequency welding is really an interesting thing. It's sort of like when you put a piece of aluminum in your microwave and it just sparks out. Things like that you need to be really careful about. So that would be like iron oxide red pigment would be an example of that. So if you're making a very small part and using RF, you might really want to make sure that your compounder knows that, so that they use an organic pigment, which won't have hardly any effect on attracting or sparking through with RF. Other than catheters, what other applications do you see a demand coming forth for these nano-composite materials? That's what I hope you can answer.
Okay.
Well, I've got a question on that very subject. Right now we have we build catheters that require a pretty stiff section for steering devices. Would your nanopump eliminate the need for braiding? Would you have any case histories of that?
That's a really good question, and one that I really can't answer, just because of non-disclosure agreements. But in terms of replacing braid, that's really pushing the limits. So if you had like a medium hardness Pebax, it won't get you there. If you step up to nylon 12, start getting closer. And we're working on some methods where we can combine much stiffer polyamides, like semi-aromatic polyamides, and create a nanostructure within something like nylon 12. And it almost becomes its own structured internal braid. And combining that, again, with nanoclay, where you can have a nanostructure that's nano-reinforced, it really gives some unique flexibility in formulating and in design that may be able to do away with braid. But for right now, there's some people who are working along those lines, and I can't say that there's been any great successes in being able to replace braid with anything other than like PEEK or polyimide.
Oh, following on the coattails of that, actually there's a client that was interested in peroxide base sterilization. Are there any general comments on what to watch out for materials, or particularly the compounded materials that you've described when it comes to peroxide sterilization?
Oh, we would really want to add some extra antioxidant then. There's really nothing more efficient as an oxidizer than a peroxide. So in some cases, you could actually cause some chain fissioning and some softening of the surface, like with polypropylene. With polyethylenes, you can get some cross-linking at the surface and maybe a little bit of embrittlement. TPUs and nylons aren't necessarily as bad. So you should be able to get by that way. But again, some extra antioxidants should really be built into the system to compensate for that.
Okay. And ETO, from your experience, has, I mean, I guess I've been hearing it's the gentlest type of sterilization out there. It shouldn't affect Pebax and those type of materials. Is there anything about that you want to, I don't know, say that that's not true, or are there things to be aware of about that statement? On the other end, I guess peroxides I think are more aggressive, but then ETO, is that considered really the most gentlest type of sterilization, and are there effects to watch out for?
Other than too much compatibility and just having it stay in too long, in which case I guess the ETO Freon works better. But there's not much on the compounder's end that you can really do with ETO. It's just so fugitive, it comes and goes. And like with all things, depending on the conditions of the sterilization, some extra stabilizer, some antioxidant is always helpful.
Any other questions?
Now this is Pratik. You mentioned that the one barium compound is better for radio opacity than the other. Is there a particular reason for that?
I'm sorry, I missed the very first part of the question.
There were two barium compounds. One is barium sulfate, and I forgot the name of the other one. But the second one was a better for the radio opacity.
Okay. Yeah, there's actually 3 base metals that are used routinely. So barium in the form of barium sulfate, very common. And then bismuth is a much heavier element. And that is used basically as a ceramic, so it will be in the form of bismuth oxychloride, bismuth subcarbonate, or bismuth trioxide. And then the third metal is tungsten. And it's really the difference in densities between barium and bismuth that you would make that decision. Barium is relatively cheap, and very common and white and heat stable, so we try to use that whenever possible. If you need the extra density of bismuth, then you start working the trade-offs with the different bismuth compounds. Some are more heat stable than others, some have more or less color. So yeah, it just becomes more of a formulation issue. With the barium, you don't really need to worry much about it, but it is not as radiopaque because of the density.
Okay. So, and you are saying that at present for the catheters manufacturing, more customers are using bismuth?
Probably the majority is barium sulfate.
Okay.
You know, people tend to get into their zone, and basically every catheter they make has 30% barium sulfate, and then another company will do 20% bismuth oxychloride for everything. I can't say that there's necessarily a great reason for that, other than people are happiest following predicate devices. So if somebody had good success with 20% bismuth oxychloride, they tend to just keep going with it.
Okay.
I got another question, or I wonder if you could comment on. A few years ago, we had some Pebax tubing that was radiopaque filled, and we're not sure what it was. But after about 3 months of sitting on the tabletop, the stuff became extremely brittle, and it seemed to be more affected on the side that was pointing the UV up towards the UV light. So I wondered if do you have any comment what could have gone on there? It was so brittle, you look at it cross-eyed and it just crumbles. Yeah,
that's why we have standard packages for heat and light stabilizers for Pebax for just that reason. The metal tends to catalyze anything that's going to go bad with the UV. UV and polymers just don't get along together in general. And there are a lot of metals that will catalyze bad reactions. Like anatase titanium dioxide is a classic photo-tendering metal. So if you use a little bit of that in a polypropylene part, put it outside, it'll crumble. Iron chloride will do the same thing. And some of the radiopaque fillers will also push in that direction. It's also something that's pretty easy to compensate for. So that's something that we've been doing for some time.
Okay, it was so you couldn't believe the brittleness of the product. And clients out here on the West Coast had to do a couple of recalls over that very problem. I just don't know. Have you heard of that happening before?
Yeah, and that's why we have a standard package for compensating for that.
Just a follow-up, I remember in a discussion with, I think I mentioned to you before too, it was like Eric Gamache over at Arkema, he was talking about how in the standard med polymers, they don't have a UV stabilizer, and it's really for the the non-med grade ones, like used for automotive industry, those actually have a UV stabilizer and so he was saying that I guess what you're describing is you would only option in if you know that your product's going to have some UV exposure, then include that package that you're describing, right?
Correct, and this is a package that's been through USP Class 6 testing. And has been used in multiple devices, so it has some history.
Yeah, the UV I was referring to was the UV coming from our fluorescent light in the clean room. And it was so surprising to see it have such a drastic effect. So I'm always kind of worried about that. We build stuff quickly, we get them out to the field, and all of a sudden things are breaking.
Oh, yeah, and if you have like tungsten lamps or halide lamps in a warehouse, super high intensity things, have ridiculous amounts of UV output. I've seen materials change color sitting on a loading dock.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's not just being outside.
This is David Dodds. As Bill said, these formulations have years behind them, and people have developed products without the UV and heat stabilizers, and they continue to be used, and they've been tested. And the dirty word is in the industry is requalification. So people really don't want to requalify their materials. But we, anytime we're developing a new product or working with a customer, we highly suggest that the materials are UV and light stabilized. We've seen burst strength drop in balloons on materials that are not heat and light stabilized, and catheters that aren't used within a certain amount of time, they start to lose their properties just through the light in the office.
Yeah.
So this is something that we've been as sales and technical people, have been promoting as much as we can, and when we have the opportunity to either qualify a new device or requalify an old device on the med grade of Pebax, we recommend the heat and light stabilizer. The other part of this is that next year, Arkema will only be supporting med grade Pebax materials for medical applications. In the past, they allowed the SA grades and the other grades to be used in the medical apps. So, as Bill said, as this becomes more and more regulated, we have to pay attention in the design phase to make sure that we think about these things that that, like you said, no one would have thought about it unless you sat it on the table for a few days. So, it definitely has to be in the design consideration and something that we're always communicating to our customers and designers.
It almost says, like, I'm wondering about the packaging, if the label that says, it's been exposed to a certain amount of UV, and how much, I don't know, if it's transparent packaging for the inside.
As customers switch from the more industrial grades over to the med grade, because they're going to have to make that switch next year, one of the considerations is going to be reformulating these materials with the heat and light stabilizer package. So we're already seeing requests to sample materials with the heat and light stabilizer, and it's going to be something that's going to pop up, and you're going to see probably from your customers as they requalify materials.
So when will that grade with the stabilizers be available?
It's available right now. The materials that come out of Arkema, the med material, the Pebax med, are not. They do not come from the supplier heat and light stabilized. We add that in the compounding step.
Okay.
But that's available at any time you need it.
Okay. I think we've had a good discussion. It was really great to hear about these new classical materials, and maybe just one final round of applause for Bill, because I think that was really well put together. So I guess just one quick note for our event next month. It's going to be Henkel Loctite. They're going to it's to tie in. It's interesting because they're going to talk about UV curing, and that's a bonding process that has to be done with. We've seen it for catheters for Pebax, so it'll be interesting to compare. That's something that to know this consideration that you brought up for design that we should keep in mind. And if there are any questions, I can put people in touch with Bill too if you didn't catch his email. So.
Is this presentation going to be available online also?
So would you be open to sharing like a PDF of your slides, do you think, Bill?
Of course.
Okay. That would be great.
And one note from the West Coast sales guy here. We talk a lot about catheter materials and materials for implants. We are a custom compounder, and we service not only the small lot extrusion for catheters, but we do service a lot of the injection molding market in Class 2 and Class 1 devices. So if it's something that needs to be compounded and has unique properties, we service and provide materials into those applications too.
Great.
Yeah, we already are getting some compounding from you guys with barium sulfate.
Yeah, some was for you. Okay. Okay, great. Thank you, all of you guys. I guess everyone logging in online, and also people coming to our on-site as well. Have a great rest of your, week, and also safe travels to those that are traveling too. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julia.